Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, the Thomas Jefferson Weather Report says we can't understand why it's 44 or 46, and it's not as comfortable as it was the other days. And there's no special wind, but the sun is out, and it's just chilly. It's uncomfortable. So that's the way it is. The world is a little uncomfortable right now. We see strange things happening in Russia, Ukraine. We see strange things happening between the Arabs and the Israelis. Here at home, we have a man who's been charged in 91 counts, 4 criminal indictments, using every bit of money he can to defend against it, and people seriously think he should be our next president. So the world has lost its grounding in rational thought, disciplined action, the ability to weigh what is right for the many and not to overlook the few. People are tired with Biden, but they talk as if they could somehow live with Trump. Additional candidates are in the mix to confuse the outcome even more. And amazingly, despite all these destructive, dystopic machinations, our economy is good. We are otherwise in chaos. And the ability to deal with one another is difficult because people say things that they would not say 5 years ago, might not have believed 5 years ago. The notion of how we go on from here is those of us who think we have a frame of reference follow it and encourage all those people who are elected and are in a position to improve things to do that. But what do you do worldwide with a Russia when Putin thought that Navalny should not be returned to his mother for a funeral? Now that's changed, but his position was that she could have a private funeral, but he didn't want it to turn into a circus of some sort. And if they couldn't reach an agreement, they're going to bury Navalny right up there on the prison grounds. Now that's changed, and I don't know what assurances she gave. But the world, if you can encapsulate the opinions of people and synthesize it into some accumulated scream, said, "Niet." And perhaps, even through the wannabe Soviet leader of Russia, thought he should bear witness and resolve that. For all we know, China, Korea, others, Iran, may have encouraged that he back off that. Now, in terms of our response to it, we imposed all these sanctions. And perhaps the administration would like to take credit for that. But you know, Russia is growing faster than the United States, Germany, and several other countries. And they have made arrangements with other nation states so that the sanctions are not so much of a deterrence, if at all. So we are kind of paper tigers with the old tricks we use to resolve current political disturbances. Now, what about Netanyahu? Apparently there are talks, and I guess they continue to be, to have a ceasefire. It's humiliating and embarrassing that the United States was out there opposing and resisting it. And plainly, Netanyahu wanted to delay it. And so there is nevertheless reports of talks of a ceasefire. And the United States' position is that there should be no terrorism from one side or the other and no reoccupation of Gaza. But that's That's a distance away from an agreement that may go into place. And we also are opposed to the settlements being in the West. That is, the illegal settlements. That is a matter of international law and otherwise. They're impermissible in their existence. And this is what we're pushing Netanyahu to respect. And plainly, if there's a two-nation solution, you can't have hybrid sections in one section or the other. I'm not sure how Gaza will work in any kind of settlement, but we leave that to people that somehow or other are getting around the bloodthirsty opponents who want nothing but the absolute and total destruction of each other. And while they're doing that, they're going to bring us and a lot of other nation states with them. Is there an intelligent form of life that's beyond our view in the corridors of power in Washington, the Middle East, and elsewhere? We'll find out. Unfortunately, the negative will mean that the hostilities continue and the killings continue, and we're in a very rough place. So that's our story. America, when they talk about Russia, talks about what terrible prisons they have. And I clerk with a fella, Ira Robbins, who teaches at American U Law School, who's an expert on really what's wrong with our prison system and what we could do to improve upon it. And there's another report that just came out. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him making some comment on it. And the report basically says in the period 2014 to 2021, 344 prisoners died. And when we're not talking about a natural death by age. We're talking about homicides, a whole variety of things, overdoses, and a whole variety of things like that. Many years ago, I was both a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, and I prosecuted some official corruption cases in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And some of the findings that I had, I passed on to Ira that became part of his work. But his work so far exceeds my paltry contribution to his understanding of what I saw and what he learned elsewhere. But what do we do about it? The private prisons in some places, there's so much wrong with it. And we talk about others and don't do anything ourselves. Don't lift a finger to lighten the load. It's kind of interesting that they say in another report that air pollution causes cognitive decline. Now, wouldn't you like to analyze that? Which came first? Did we have the cognitive decline and then the air pollution? Or did we start with bad models that caused the air pollution and then we suffered further cognitive decline? The terrible thing about it is that we just don't take it seriously, and we scratch our heads about it. And I posted just the other day an interview with Tim Flannery, who's from Australia, no relation except probably some distant sept. The Flannerys went west toward America, and my sept from County Mayo, and I don't know when his people left Ireland and he went east toward Australia. But he's made quite a contribution in his life. But he has, despite the clarity of his expression, the simple statement of the goals, how it could be done. Australia doesn't do it. They did have a government that was very responsive, and they did make a difference during that period of time. But then, nothing. The last thing in terms of cognitive decline, not that I'm talking about the Supreme Court in that reference, because I think they know exactly what they're doing. What they're doing is wrong. What specifically? Well, there is this immunity thing. Everybody agrees who talks on the subject that Trump is not immune from prosecution for any reason that's applicable in any of the cases pending, although the focus is the case overseen by Judge Chutkan in Washington, D.C. And there was, as you remember, a request by the special counsel Smith to expedite the consideration of this question, and that didn't happen. Then Trump submitted an appeal within the expedited schedule required by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia that decided he had no immunity, so he was seeking to overturn that. The government submitted its opposition brief 8 days ago, and Trump submitted his material 2 weeks ago, and we don't hear anything from the Supreme Court. Now, there are various theories. The corrupt theory, that is, that we have 6 justices who owe their job to Trump and would like to have their decisions and their legacies persist, and that could be compromised if Biden wins again. And so maybe it's in their best interest if it's purely a bunch of hackers, political hacks, who seek to serve the person who put him on the bench, brought him to the dance, so to speak. And if that's the case, they could decide, we better hear that, and we'll hear it next term beginning in next October, and the decision in such a case could come as late as the following June. So that's the political one. And then there's another one, that they've decided to not handle it, to leave the Court of Appeals opinion as it is, but some want to write a dissenting opinion, and so that's taking time. Well, we're going to find out, I'd say sooner or later, but if my skepticism is correct, as any observer could plainly say of the Supreme Court these days, that there's cause and reason to be skeptical, that they'll delay it as much as they can. And that's bad for America. What does that mean for the prosecutions? Well, standing in the corner right over there is Bragg, and he's got a date for the trial to go forward. So, and Trump, if he managed to be only prosecuted and convicted in that case, well, he couldn't pardon himself. He could go to jail. Well, what else do we have? Well, we got the Georgia case. And it remains to be seen if the judge is going to do what I think I would do, assuming all of these things they say. I don't believe that the way you pay off an appointment to a job in the government is if you become the boyfriend of the person who appointed you, that you pay for a trip, a vacation. That's not the usual way that you have kickbacks. And it does appear that they shared the costs, which is another thing you don't do if you do, quote, kickbacks. So I think the Georgia case is one that should be released to be scheduled, and there'd be 2 state cases. As I've said before, I don't expect Luce Cannon, the judge in Florida, to favor anyone but Trump, and so delay is in her plan, in my opinion. And people ask what should be done with her. Well, I think in the first instance there should have been a motion to recuse herself for what she'd already done before the indictments were filed, and it ended up on her docket. But there we have it. So the federal case of Chutkan, that the judge who presides over the case in D.C. waits upon the Supreme Court. We can't have a rerun like we did with Bush Gore. And I think Gore gave up too easily, frankly, because that was a legitimate objection. And the question is, how do you overcome a Supreme Court ruling? And that would have been a constitutional crisis, but it was a crisis because the Supreme Court decided the case and didn't give it a chance to work itself out. So here I am in our chilly cathedral of trees, and I hope you get out, even though it's chilly, to enjoy some of this. All the best. Bye-bye.